Hey, I'm Jake Lizio, and in this video what I want to do is explore the idea of borrowed chords. What are they and how can we make music with them? Now this can be a very confusing topic, but it can also be a very simple topic. So in this video we'll start easy, we'll keep things pretty basic, and then gradually we'll introduce more and more of the advanced concepts. And these concepts will kind of depend on your knowledge of all the modes that I've taught previously on this channel. So if you ever get lost, you can just check the description and I've linked to a video that should fill you in on the missing details. To briefly summarize why we want to learn our borrowed chords, well, when you're writing in a major key, it can feel kind of limiting. There's only 7 chords in a major key if you want to stay in that key. So if you want to start bringing in chords outside of the key, there's a few different options. We've already talked about secondary dominance on this channel, but my favorite option is borrowed chords. You find a chord from a parallel mode, and then you bring it into your progression, and then you have an easy way to play over that too. So let's go into that process of borrowing chords from a parallel mode. I'm going to start by building the C major scale and the chords of the C major scale. And that's what we'll be composing in. We'll be in C major. But I also want to be aware of the chords of C minor. So here's my C minor scale and the chords of C minor. Let's come up with a very basic chord progression in C major. How about 1, 6, 4, 5? So we've got C major is my 1, my 6 is A minor, my 4 is F, and my 5 is G. This is a chord progression that's been played a billion times before. It's a good old classic oldies doo-wop love song progression, the 1, 6, 4, 5. I want to use this as my baseline chord progression, but what I want to do is I want to introduce a borrowed chord. And let's look at that C minor scale. Let's try borrowing the 6, all right? The 6th chord of C minor is going to be an A flat major, right there, all right? So A flat major is my borrowed 6th chord. I'm going to bring that chord into my new progression. So let's just replace one of our chords with A flat. I mean, there's a million ways we could use this chord. What I want to do is just throw it in there. Let's just replace it, right? So here's C major, here's my A minor. Instead of F, let's borrow that A flat, and then we can go back to G. So what I've got is C major, A minor, A flat major, and then G. And I think that sounds far more interesting, far more unique than my initial chord progression. So when I hear something like that, I think, man, that would be really easy to turn into like a modern oldie song, you know, kind of that dream space rock kind of stuff. So let's just take the same idea, add a bass guitar, add some organ, add a singer. I had my friend Joe come in here and help us out, and here's what we got.
I think I miss you, even though you don't love me. I still wanna kiss you and feel your arms around me, baby.
Now, like I said, there's no hard or fast rule on exactly how and where you are supposed to borrow these chords. So let's just slap that borrowed chord in at the end of our progression instead. So I'll keep the C, I'll keep the A minor, I'll keep the F, but I'll replace G with the A flat. And now I've got this chord progression. C, A minor, to F major, and then the surprise A flat. Pretty weird sounding chord, right? What to do with it? Well, what if you played them as power chords instead? C power chord, A power chord, F power chord, and a G sharp power chord, A flat power chord. Well, then you got kind of like a punk rock song. All you gotta do is add some whiny vocals on top, and boom, there you go.
If you could tell me why, then I'll apologize for all I said to you. It wasn't true.
My favorite example of this being used is in Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. That song's in the key of C, right? And we go through quite a few of the diatonic chords in the key of C major. Here's the 2, and then the 1. Here's the 5 of 6, and then here's the 6. And then we borrow, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. So it's borrowing in that 6, and then coming down to the 5. It's a suspended 4 chord, and then coming back to the top. Really lovely use of that chord. Now I can borrow any of these chords. I don't have to keep just borrowing the 6. Let's try borrowing that 7th chord, which is going to be B flat major, right? So I'll be in C major, and here's a C, here's my 5 chord G, here's my 4 chord F. What if I just jump to that borrowed chord right there? Then I get this nice progression, C, G, F, and then B flat. Now, when that B flat comes up, it did come from the C minor scale, right? So one of the good bets that you could use over, like to sing over that or to play over that, would be use the C minor scale. You can absolutely go into that scale. But this flat 7 chord also occurs in C mixolydian. So which one are you really borrowing from? Are you borrowing from C mixolydian or are you borrowing from C minor? That chord could be either of them, all right? And this is where it gets a little fuzzy. When you borrow a chord like B flat, it doesn't have to be from minor or mixolydian. You could play C mixolydian over that B flat major, and you're still going to get a sound, just a different sound than playing the C minor scale. So long story short, when you do borrow a chord from a parallel scale like minor, it would be a good idea to shift your playing into that parallel key, right? When that B flat comes up, I'm going to pretend like I'm in the key of C minor. Or, since it's also in mixolydian, I'm going to pretend like I'm in C mixolydian. But there are no other keys that have this flat 7 chord in there, so those are the only 2 scales I'm going to be thinking about. The most common borrowed chord is the 4. If I'm in the key of C major, and if I go to my 4th chord, which is F, if I borrow the 4th chord, it becomes F minor. And I can resolve that back to C. I did a whole video on that. I highly recommend it because we go through several different examples of that borrowed 4 chord showing up. Let's try borrowing the 2, right? I'm in C major. The 2 chord of C minor is a D half diminished. And if I play a D half diminished, it will resolve pretty nicely back to C major. So using that concept, I decided to write a very, very small little fingerstyle section in the key of D that just went, we're in the key of D, and basically what we'll do is start on the 4 chord, and then the 5 chord, and then we'll go from the 1, we'll walk down to the 6, and then we'll bring in the borrowed 2, and then resolve it finally back to the tonic. So here's what it sounds like as a fingerstyle arrangement. I figured, hey, what the heck? Let's try turning this into a string quartet. I don't know the first thing about arranging for a string quartet, but I figured let's just go for it. As long as it sounds good, I'll be happy with it. So here's my arrangement of that same idea. Now, I encourage you to experiment with the other chords. You can also borrow the 3 chord. That is going to be an E flat major. That's going to give you that very God chord feel, a very epic, weird change if you come straight off the C like that. But I also want to talk about borrowing from other modes. We don't have to borrow from just minor. We could borrow from the parallel Lydian scale. We could borrow from the parallel Dorian, all sorts of parallel modes of C. So if you think about all the different chords that are available to us, we're in the key of C major, but look at the chords available to you in C Dorian. Those are all chords you can borrow. Look at the chords of C Phrygian. All those chords you can borrow, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So that is, in my opinion, why it is such a good thing to be practicing your modes, and really practicing your modes in isolation, right? Really treating Phrygian like its own key, treating mixolydian like its own key. If you learn to do that, then it becomes a very trivial task to just borrow those chords because you're familiar with the structure of Phrygian. You know that Phrygian has a minor 1 chord and a flat 2 major chord. So if I wanted to borrow from Phrygian in the key of C major, I can just borrow that flat 2 major. That would be a D flat major, and I'm borrowing from Phrygian. And for that little tiny bit of time there, I would be in C Phrygian. It's a pretty disruptive chord, right? But you can actually get away with it, and it's a fairly common chord to use in the classical world. This is known as the Neapolitan chord if you play it inverted, Neapolitan 6th. So playing that D flat and then just putting an F on the bass instead would give me a Neapolitan 6 chord in the key of C. Let's take that borrowed Phrygian chord and let's combine it with some of the stuff we were doing earlier. I'll be in the key of C, and then I'm going to go to my 4 chord, and I'll go back to my 1 chord, C, F, C. Here's the C, here's the borrowed 2 from Phrygian, and then to 5. I'll go from my 4 again to my 1, and then I'm going to borrow the 7 from minor. Back to 4, here's the borrowed 6 from minor, 5, 1. So that chord progression I put together, and it reminded me of kind of like a Fish song, like a hippie jam band rock song. So I had my friend Mike Mugley help me out with the vocals on that one, and we got together this piece of music.
Can't help but feeling I'm a maniac. Spending my last days in the sun, and I'm pretty sure something is wrong with me. But it's nice to hear you say that I'm gonna get out of here
notable borrowed chord that's not from minor is the 2 chord from Lydian. If I'm in the key of C major, and if I think of the parallel Lydian scale, that would be C Lydian. Well, C Lydian has a D major in it, right? And I really like bringing in that chord every once in a while. The example I'll give you is from Total Eclipse of the Heart. That song is in the key of A flat, and it's just that classic 1, 6, 4, 5 progression we already heard before. But eventually, they go from the 4 to the 5 to the minor 6, and then they borrow that 2 to give it a little bit of brightness. It's a really nice kind of rejoicing, unexpected brightness that comes out of that major 2. And then they do it again, back to the tonic, to the 5, the 6, and then borrowing the 2 from Lydian. And the Lydian scale would work absolutely perfect there. The A flat Lydian scale would be the appropriate choice for that.
Together we can take you to the end of the line. The love is like a shadow on me all of the time.
The last thing I want to talk about is borrowing from other modes when you're already in minor. So not starting in major, right? Let's pretend like I'm in the key of A minor. Here's my 1 chord. My 6 chord in A minor is F. My 3 chord in A minor is C, but if I bring in a D major, that chord really doesn't fit in to the key of A minor. But I can think of it as being borrowed from A Dorian, right? Because in the A Dorian key, I have an A minor and a D major. So that's kind of what I think of House of the Rising Sun. House of the Rising Sun is an A minor, a C, a D major, and then right to an F major. So to me, that is like we're either in A minor and then we're borrowing from A Dorian, or we're in A Dorian and borrowing from A minor. But I really feel like it's strong A minor tonality that Dorian comes in there just temporarily before we start sinking back into the minor key, introducing the dominant chord. So I decided to write with this in like the techno EDM style. I just took an A minor chord, and then I went to an F major chord, and then I went straight to the D, but I put F sharp on the bass, and then I went up to the G major, which would be the 7 chord in A minor. So A minor, F major, D over F sharp to G, and I thought it was a pretty energetic progression, and so I used it for this little build up into electronic synthy nonsense. So when a chord pops up and it's not in the key, one of the first things I ask myself is that a borrowed chord? Because if it is a borrowed chord, and if I can figure out where it came from, it gives me a very easy way to solo over that chord or to sing over that chord. That's not the only way to treat these chords, right? If I'm in the key of C major and an A flat pops up, I'm not forced to play C minor over this, right? You could treat it different ways. But I think thinking of the parallel mode is a very simple way to figure out, hey, what scale should I play on top of this? Also, keep in mind, I already did a video on Modal Mixture, but it really focused on the lead side of things. So if you like this concept, but are more concerned about, what would you do over the top of it, I suggest you check out my video on mixing major and minor and Modal Mixture. That's what this is all about. Modal Mixture, borrowed chords, modal interchange, it all means the same things. It all means we're in a key and we're exploring to other parallel keys, not relative keys, so other keys that start on C. So I hope you liked this video and I hope you learned something. If you did like this video, you can thank my Patreon supporters for making it possible. If you really liked this video, you can consider joining them at my Patreon page. But if you can't do that, that's totally cool. Just like, comment, and share this video with your friends. That's good enough for me. Thanks for watching.